iPad. Hi, Ben.
Hello, this is Cybersecurity Club. We're introducing Marvin Cable for his talk on the top concerns for democracy, peace, and humanity: misinformation, disinformation, and influence operations. Marvin is a faculty member at UMass. He's currently teaching 2 courses, one on computer crime law and the other on internet law policy. So thank you, Marvin, for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm super excited. Honored to be here. And this is a great thing to do on a Friday. I feel like my wife is super happy that I'm talking to you guys and not her about this, because this is all I talk about, or at least it seems that way. I'm getting a little bit of an echo. I don't know if where it's coming from. Somebody's mic. Oh, all right, seemed to go off. Okay, so let's get started. Can you guys see my screen? I'm getting some sort of an echo.
Yes.
Cool. I wonder where that echo is coming from.
I don't hear the echo either, so I think it's on your end.
Yeah, it probably is. So let's get started. I'll just do it with the echo. It's annoying, I guess, right? A little bit. So some warnings first. And welcome and thanks for coming. Warning, this is not a political speech. I'm not trying to say vote for somebody or say that someone's politics are wrong. I'm not advocating for any political ideology. And Aaron just said, feel free to ask any questions. So feel free during this time also to ask any questions too. And again, when you ask questions, let's also be respectful to any sort of political ideology that people have, and let's be respectful, civil too. So a little bit about myself. I'm a dad, so you might see some kids running in here, hopefully not. A husband, a lawyer, a lecturer, and among some other things. As Aaron said, I teach internet law and policy and computer crime law, and also I'm a lawyer too. So what does this talk about? This talks about misinformation, disinformation in the internet right now that's flooding our communications. And what's happening is we're ending up with a different set of facts. Everyone's having their own version of what's going on. I'm not even sure right now if Trump really has coronavirus. It's like, I don't even trust the information that's on the internet, even though it's in every media outlet right now. And the problem with all these different sets of facts is that we all end up with different opinions and decisions based on these different facts. And you could have very intelligent people coming to very different conclusions. And that's a big issue, especially when we're trying to solve real world problems. We can't do it effectively. We can't do it efficiently. And if this continues, who knows what the result is going to be? It's only speculation as to what it'll be. Some have speculated civil war. Some say that we'll never be able to solve global climate change. Who knows what the end result of this is, but there's an issue right now that does need to be solved. As I said, global warming is one of the big ones. We're finding that there's just people disagree here as to even if global warming is happening. We're seeing a lot of coronavirus issues, like if you drink a certain amount of water, maybe coronavirus will go away. If you eat Chinese food, maybe coronavirus will go away. We're also seeing diplomacy kind of struggle in a lot of different venues all over the world. And the NSA, the CIA have warned that the disinformation around the internet will create some sort of political and diplomacy problems. And if this continues, like I said, I think we're all going to have a different version of what the world looks like. We're going to have almost like 3 billion Truman shows. I don't know if you guys have seen the Truman Show, but like we're all going to have our own idea of reality, which is kind of crazy. So here's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk a little bit about the law on the internet. I think I should do that because I'm a lawyer. I'm not going to make this a class. I'm going to make this kind of like a topical talk. And then I want to provide some tidbits. And thinking about what to talk about for this, there's so much to talk about. So I feel like 10 things is fine. Actually, it took me quite a while, maybe about an hour, 2 hours, just to whittle it down to 10 things. You can imagine if you just think about it right now, how many things you can think about what's wrong with misinformation or disinformation on the internet. You could come up with more than 10 things just right off the top of your head, I'm sure, if you really just thought about it. And it was really kind of difficult to whittle it down. So I have 10 things. And after those 10 things, I talk a little bit briefly about what can be done, and then we can maybe discuss and debate. I'm hoping that some good things would come out during that time period. So some definitions, in case you don't know what disinformation means or misinformation means. Disinformation is information that is false and deliberately so. It's created to kind of harm or have some sort of intentional effect. Misinformation is information that is false, but not necessarily created with the intention of causing harm. It's just wrongfully presented in a way. So there's more of like a malice behind a disinformation type of thing. So again, I'm going to go through these really kind of 4 things: the law of speech on the internet and some tidbits, and then what can be done. So law on the internet. So I want to talk about really kind of 3 main areas of law, or 3 main kind of concepts. This idea of marketplace of ideas, the First Amendment or freedom of speech, and then the Communications Decency Act. So in our law, just throughout time, since really kind of the beginning of our nation, we've had this idea that the truth rises to the top. It's like you can put all this information in a jar and have the truth come to the top of the jar. That's kind of been what our law has hoped would happen. And the reason is because the law wants to promote an exchange of ideas, and it doesn't want to prohibit any type of speech from happening. And it seems okay, but what happens like when all the ideas are like the overwhelming ideas are negative and the truth can't come to the top? Maybe it's stuck at the bottom for some reason. And that's kind of what happens. One of the most famous quotes given about marketplace of ideas was given by Justice Black in Associated Press v. United States. And he says, "The First Amendment rests on the assumption that the wildest possible dissemination of information from diverse and antagonistic sources is essential to the welfare of the public, that a free press is a condition of a free society." And we've kind of lived for years, for centuries, really, really since the birth of our nation, with this idea that we shouldn't stop what people say, and we should let the truth raise to the top. And this is kind of because of what happened in England during the 1700s, 1600s. This is also because of what happened during the colonial times in the 1700s, 1600s, that the forefathers wanted to make speech a super, and hi to those that are joining right now here in Zoom, wanted to make speech something that was free, freedom of speech. But again, what happens when all the speech out there is overwhelmingly either false or some sort of misinformation, disinformation, and the truth can't rise to the top, and people can't know what the reality is out there? Is this idea outdated? Is the marketplace of ideas outdated? And seemingly so. I think it is. And if you just type in marketplace of ideas on Google and just search around the internet, you'll find a lot of people kind of agree, and very scholars in this field of freedom of speech kind of agree that like the marketplace of ideas is kind of eroding. This was kind of made during a time when it was just the printing press. It was just word of mouth. There wasn't AI creating bots on Twitter. There wasn't all this information just being spread and shared like it is now. It wasn't made really for this world that we're in. So maybe it's outdated. Another thing I want to talk about is First Amendment freedom of speech, which I kind of just talked about a little bit. It's kind of part of our national ethos, just like I said, like this idea that we have the freedom to say what we want has really kind of been there since the birth of our nation. The First Amendment says that the Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And this is kind of a, if you're looking here at the slide up here on Zoom, this is kind of something I show to a lot of my students. This is what they call a mind map or a tree. and it shows the different types of speeches out there and how it can be regulated. Basically, speech should be free and not prohibited by any sort of law unless it's harmful in a way. Like, there's certain things you do want to prohibit from being on the internet. You do want to prohibit things like child pornography, really obscene things. You want to prohibit true threats, things that are like threatening people's lives. You want to also prohibit things like defamation or libel, things that are hurting people's profession, their character. And you want to prohibit fighting words, speech that advocates any sort of violence, but you really want to protect political speech. Since the beginning of our nation, we've always protected political speech, and we want to put a high bar as to any law that would prohibit that. So we want to prevent any sort of law that would stop political speech. And this becomes an issue on the internet, as you can imagine, because if in our law we have this kind of like understanding to not prohibit political speech, what do we do about all this massive misinformation on the internet that's political speech? Our common law, our laws have said for years that political speech should be protected, yet this political speech is a lot of times misinformation and disinformation. And really, if you think about it, it's harmful. It's harmful in a way not the same as maybe defamation is, or obscene materials are, or threats or fighting words, but it's harmful. So maybe there does need to be a kind of a change in the law, in the First Amendment law, as to how we deal with speech on the internet. Also, just a side note, I put this in here. There is no really common ground as to whether AI outputs or machine learning outputs are considered speech. Things like if you type in something in Google and you get a result, is that result speech or not? And that's a big deal, because then that means that if it is, there's a lot of protections that these AI outputs would have. So there couldn't be laws made protecting what the machine learning algorithms output. And that's a big deal, because that limits legislators' ability to make laws. And I put three kind of categories of cases here: the Google cases, animal cases, and Massachusetts corporation cases. In these two Google cases, basically the courts found that the results from the Google's algorithm, the search results, were speech. However, in some animal cases, especially one with a parrot, where the parrot was speaking, the courts pretty much found that animal speech is not protected under the First Amendment. However, in Massachusetts, a line of cases was built and ultimately got up to the Supreme Court that said that corporations' statements, like mission statements, things that they do, are considered speech. So you have these kind of like three different categories or realms of cases dealing with First Amendment that don't really solidify whether or not outputs from Facebook feeds or algorithms are considered speech or not. So one last piece of law I wanted to cover, and then we'll move on to those tidbits, is the Communications Decency Act. And usually in my class, I can see everyone's faces because everyone has their webcams on, and I ask them, have you ever heard of this before? And overwhelmingly, everybody is shaking their heads no. And it's crazy, because it's probably the most important law on the internet. It's probably, if you have to pick maybe one or two laws that are the foundation of how the internet works, the CDA 230 is one of them. It's probably, arguably, the most important law on the internet, and people don't know that. So let me go fast forward here to the provision, and I'll go backwards in a second. What the law says is no provider or user of an internet service or internet computer service shall be treated as a publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. Okay, so that's some mumbo jumbo there. And you can read this later and look up. It's CDA section 230. And what this means is that platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram cannot be held liable for the speech of others on their platform. So if there's some sort of like defamation, like some liable statement that's on Twitter or Facebook, they cannot be held liable for those statements. And they have the ability to remove at their will those statements. And this is a big deal. This idea that is embodied here in this law is kind of new, actually, new in like the realm of humanity. It really kind of came out in the late 90s and early 2000s. What was happening is that before this law, if platforms would moderate content on their discussion boards or wherever, they were considered a publisher of content. And any sort of content they missed, like let's say they missed moderating some obscene child pornography, they would be considered the publisher of that child pornography and be held liable as if they were the ones that published it. And so what they would end up doing is not moderate at all any of their discussion boards, anything at all. And what would end up happening is all platforms would look kind of like an 8chan platform. There was just hate speech everywhere. So to think about it this way, like let's go back to like the 90s, right? And you are Disney or some sort of family-friendly company, and you want to make a website that people can post things on and communicate on. And the CDA doesn't exist then, right? And so you want to make it family-friendly. So that means you got to take down all negative or really kind of disgusting or non-PG or PG-13 or types of posts. And if you missed any, that would mean that you were liable for what you missed, because you were considered a publisher because you were moderating. So what this incentivized platforms would do was to not moderate at all. And that meant that there was just hateful speech on nearly every single platform out there. So you had this, what they call Moderators Dilemma. Should you moderate or remove user content at the cost of accepting legal responsibility for anything you miss, or do as little as possible to manage user content and escape legal exposure, but your platform just looks crazy? So CDA 230 came out and said basically that platforms are not liable when they moderate. And that's a big deal. And that gives Twitter full reign over, moderating its posts, its content, Facebook, all these platforms. However, it's come under attack, and rightly so from both sides. There's been a lot of heat from Donald Trump in the last really just year. During the summer, he sent out an executive order trying to look at CDA 230. Within the last 2 weeks, he had Attorney General Barr send out proposed legislation trying to modify CDA 230. And the reason why Trump is mad is because his tweets can be moderated by Twitter at their discretion. Twitter can basically say, oh, we're going to take this down, and they cannot be held liable. They have the full discretion. So basically, Trump wants to change that. And also, too, on the other end, Biden just a couple of days ago sent a letter to Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg saying, hey, look, you should be doing more to moderate your content. There's a bunch of stuff out there, especially by Donald Trump Jr., about some sort of election watching campaign. And so, there's arguments on both sides, really, that the CDA should be changed, but it is the backbone. It's a legal backbone of the internet, and without it, pretty much everything you know about the internet would not exist. So moving right along, 10 tidbits. So as I said to you, I was trying to whittle down what examples I should bring up about how crazy the world is right now. And I wanted to keep it kind of family friendly, but I wanted to keep it interesting too. There's really thousands of examples, but really I just wanted to, whittle it down to a few so we could talk about it and they'd be interesting. So really what these tidbits are, they're just studies, examples, things that I have taught about Again, I have lists and lists of this stuff. I teach about this stuff. I read about this all the time. These are just kind of like the fun ones that I wanted to bring here today. So number one, I think this is probably one of the most important, is that several years ago, the Media Lab at MIT came out with a study saying basically that false information is spread at a rate of 6 times that of true information. Now think about that. 6 times. How is true information going to compete against false information if there's 6 times the amount of false information being spread? And it's crazy. I mean, we could speculate as to the human nature of it. Like, do people find it more entertaining? Do people really believe that it's true? And but it pretty much shows that false information is spread at a higher rate and almost all the time. And you can go back and read the study. You type in MIT study in Google, and you'll find it. It's pretty an amazing study. And again, MIT is a very respected institution. This is a peer-reviewed study, and this is a respected study to bring up. So I felt like this was something good here. So also, too, side note, there was another study that I had read, and it was similar to this. I just wanted to bring up and not skip it. There was a study showing that cybersecurity issues only make the news about, only flashy cybersecurity issues make the news, really, and it's only about 6% of the news. 6%. The other 94% of cybersecurity news gets buried in feeds and RSS feeds that no one really pays attention to. I've tried to make up for that and subscribe to different RSS feeds, different news sources. But again, it seems like what floats to the top are these 6% of flashy stories. So I don't know if any of you know what this is here. So this is tidbit number 2 of 10. I don't know if any of you know what this is here. I see William there. This is a flat earth. Unlike a round one. I want you to watch this video real quick.
By the way, I know you've asked about this a million times, but I'm particularly interested in it. You went on a podcast and you said you believe the earth was flat. and do you actually, you want to reel that in, or you still believe the earth is flat?
You know what, you've always tried to come back, take the statement back, but
yeah, but
on that podcast, I was just really like, man, what's going on within our world? And just a whole bunch of truth and conspiracy. I was just like, whoa, this is too much for me. And then I come out and say that, and then, whoo, the reaction it got.
Yeah, because people think maybe your brain collapsed or something like that.
It didn't.
It didn't.
No, I'm actually intellectually stable.
Well, I did give you, because you seem like a pretty bright guy, so I gave you this, and maybe like you can, at work, you can look at this. This is a gift for you.
This is Kyrie Irving.
And
he was Rookie of the Year, first-round draft pick.
The world and
he thought the Earth was round for a little while, and there's some studies done as to how this happens to people on the internet, and the YouTube algorithm is so effective in finding videos for you to watch sometimes that you go down these rabbit holes and end up believing something that you wouldn't have otherwise. And there was a study done on flat earth believers, and the majority of flat earth believers, and there's thousands of them, this is not a negligible amount of people, the flat earth believers really found this stuff on YouTube. And it was the result was from the algorithm on YouTube, and that's insane. And we'll go over why that happens in a second, but I wanted to show you maybe, it looks like 2 or 3 more examples that are very similar here as to how misinformation is spread. Check this out. So this is 5G towers getting burned recently because of the threat of the coronavirus.
For police in Quebec, this has fast become a familiar sight. A cellular tower set ablaze. In 1 week, police responded to 7 similar fires, all targeting cell towers. They've since arrested a couple in their 20s and are investigating whether they might have been motivated by a conspiracy theory linking 5G technology to COVID-19.
There are a lot of possible explanations that are being thrown around as to how the 5G piece could be, meshed with the COVID-19 piece, like two puzzle pieces that don't really fit together, but you're trying to smush them together.
One of the first to suggest the link was this Belgian doctor back in January in an interview with a local newspaper. Within 24 hours, the paper removed the story. But the spark of the conspiracy had been lit. The weeks that followed saw the claim repeated over and over on social media.
Do you see the perfect storm here for health issues?
Some, like this Ontario apothecary owner, posted this YouTube video claiming 5G weakens the immune system, allowing COVID-19 to attack.
There's no reason at all to believe that it...
Crazy to me. And again, the YouTube algorithm helped promote this, and along with Facebook. One more here. This is about vaccine hesitancy.
It's called vaccine hesitancy. In other words, members of the public out there with concerns fueled by misinformation, we should point out, online, many of it carried through social media sites. The World Health Organization referred to as vaccine hesitancy as a #1 health risk this year around the world because it has continued to grow. Social media sites under a lot of pressure to do something about that sort of misinformation. So we're seeing from Facebook, many of their sites, and found one organization found of all the health sites on Facebook that the majority of them, the vast majority of them, were fake or contained misleading and false information. So
crazy, right? And I put that one in because my wife's a doctor and this super bothers her. The vaccine hesitancy, and this is because of all the Facebook algorithm echoing things to people who are very susceptible to this type of stuff. And I'll go over this in a second here. Social media, the business model is to keep you on, right? So like social media, these platforms really have like 3 goals. They have this engagement goal to keep you on, to keep you scrolling, and an ad pops up so they make money. They have they have a growth goal. They're trying to get you to bring more people into their platform. And then their third goal is to make money. And they take these 3 goals and kind of create algorithms out of these goals to make them higher and higher and higher and do better and better and better. And what ends up happening is these platforms, these tools, I shouldn't call them tools really, become addictive. There's all these different people out there trying to make them even more addictive. There's something called growth hacking. It's a whole industry of engineers who spend their time trying to make functions on these platforms to get you to come back, to invite more people. There's industry called persuasive technology. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that too. There's classes in this. You can take classes in persuasive technology to try to get you to keep doing things or do other things. Social media is kind of crazy in what it's doing to our world here. And it's really because of the economics of the platforms. And I always tell people, if you're not paying for what you're doing, or you're not paying for the product, you probably are the product, right? Haven't you ever thought about that? Why is Facebook free? Why is Gmail free? Where's that coming from? This costs money to host my stuff. Well, advertisers are paying for this, and they're paying basically to be able to put ads up and, target to you. And the platforms, again, the engagement goal and the growth goal are trying to keep you on there. So the economics of platforms really stifle things because it makes it almost worse. And so one other thing too, about the study I came across, I just didn't want to skip it in my tidbits. The way things are shared on these platforms has a big difference in terms of how they're interpreted. So if you're looking at these 3 posts I'm putting up here on the Zoom window here, this is somebody, Casey Nolan, sharing a link, and they're shared in 3 different ways. If you notice on one of the ways in the middle, there's kind of some sort of description or comment, and again in the second one, or the third one I should say, but the first one has no description or no comments. What this research found is that the majority of people read only the comments when sharing the link. They don't actually click on the link. In fact, they find that only 20% of people click on links. And that makes sense. Like, why are you going to click on every single link that is on your feed? But they find that the majority of people actually only read the comments about the link that you're sharing. And that's crazy because then you're getting even more disinformation. How do you know that person understands that that article? And a lot of times it's just commentary. So moving right along, tidbit number 4. Social media is intentionally being used to sow discord in populations, intentionally. And the most vulnerable, I guess, governments or nations are democracies, actually, like us. So, and I was talking to someone the other day, like, well, why was it democracies? Well, it makes sense. Why would communist countries really be vulnerable to this type of stuff? It's just not, you know, you don't need to manipulate the population as much because you're already controlling the population. But democracies are very vulnerable to social media kind of misinformation campaigns. So I want to show you this Myanmar clip real quick. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what happened in Myanmar a couple of years ago, and it's really happening right now, but it's the second largest refugee situation going on right now. There's about 700,000 Muslims fleeing the area that they're in because of the campaigns, majorly because of the campaigns that took place on Facebook. That's really insane. Think about it. Facebook enabled 700,000 people to be refugees. And yes, they're not the total reason, but actually, if you had to pick just one reason, or the most important reason, it would be Facebook. In Myanmar, when you get a phone, there's not very good like cell phone reception, but there's good like internet service. So what tends to happen is that Facebook is preloaded on these phones. Now think about that. That is so that now people aren't necessarily texting each other. They're sending messages through Facebook Messenger and they're communicating through Facebook. So all the information that they're seeing or the way they're communicating for the most part is through Facebook. And what the government or the newly installed government did was use Facebook ads to create propaganda, misinformation about Muslims to create this hatred and this refugee situation going on there. So let me play this quick clip for you.
Well, a new bombshell investigation exposes Facebook's growing struggle to tackle hate speech in Myanmar. The social media site has been used to incite violence against Rohingya refugees living in the country's Rakhine state. Rohingyas are a Muslim minority group. Myanmar's Buddhist-led military launched a brutal crackdown on the group last summer, forcing around 700,000 Rohingyas to flee their homes. Reuters found more than 1,000 recent examples of posts, comments, and images on Facebook attacking Rohingya people. Reuters global investigative reporter Steve.
I mean, that's crazy. Think about that, right? And if it has an effect in a country like that, imagine the effect that can have here. And it does have an effect here. There's this term called rabble rousing. I don't know why it's called that. It's just is what it is. I've read several research reports about this, but it basically is this idea of stirring up controversy. And I want to play this quick clip right here. And this is something that happened in Houston, Texas, not to the extent of what happened in Myanmar, but it just shows you how people can be manipulated. This is a little bit on a smaller scale, though.
The rally happened here outside the Islamic Dawah Center. We didn't even cover it at the time because it was so insignificant, but it's certainly newsworthy now. The Houston Chronicle chronicled a May 2016 rally when about a dozen or so people waving rebel flags and White Lives Matter signs protested the Islamic Dawah Center. As you can see in this photo, the group was greatly outnumbered by counter-protesters.
We had about 135 people, Muslims, Christians, people of different creeds and faiths, out there to oppose their message of hate.
Dr. David Michael Smith of the Houston Socialist Movement was among those who came to support the center. Those protesting it had been prompted by a Facebook group called Heart of Texas, which called on people to, quote, stop the Islamization of Texas. But no one directly related to the website actually showed up.
Much later now, we know why.
Citing sources familiar with the matter, CNN was first to report that anti-Islamic propaganda posted by the Heart of Texas actually originated in the heart of Russia, a so-called troll factory called the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg.
I hope you're understanding what they're saying here, and I can just like recap. Basically, the Russian intelligence service created 2 Facebook groups where people join and then created an event that at the same time where they both were there, and they didn't actually know that they'd both be at the same time, and they both came at the same time rallying. That's insane. That's real world effects that, you know, and actually if they, I forget the exact amount that the Russian intelligence service used, but I think it was like something like $150 for the advertisement for the event, and that's it. Besides the actual setting up the group and putting the and making the event on that date, which is just insane. So number 6 of 10 of little tidbits, cognitive biases. So this is part of it too. Like, we're all susceptible to our own issues of sorts. Like, we're not super intelligent, extra intelligent beings. Like, we don't know the truth when we read something per se. Like, we have to do our research. We have to do our own, like, you know, analysis of sorts, and we're limited by our cognitive biases. And there's a lot of them. So I'm going to click on this link real quick here, if I can get there. Oh, it won't let me. Well, you can check it out. It's up on Google. If you see my screen or my slide there, you can type list of cognitive biases and Google it. There's hundreds of them. A lot of people have heard of confirmation bias. That's one of the more popular biases that we know of. But there's so many biases out there in terms of how we understand the world. And it makes sense. And this is just a kind of a map. Thank you, Aaron. Aaron posted it up in the chat. This is just a graphic of all the biases that we know of right now in psychology. But basically, cognitive biases are there because information overload sucks, so we need some sort of way to filter it. And a lack of meaning is kind of confusing, so we fill in the gaps. And we need to act fast when we're scrolling through our feed, or we lose our chance to, so we jump to conclusions. And this isn't getting easier, so we try to remember the important tidbits. Those are kind of like the brief parts about it. But the downside to this is that we skip in a way. We kind of conjure up our own illusions. We come to click decisions, and our memory kind of reinforces these errors. In other words, we have these shortcuts in our brain to make up fast decisions. Like, think of like walking down the street and you see somebody that might be I don't know, scary or threatening in a way, and you are about to approach that person, you quickly jump to your stereotypes or your biases to make up whatever decision you're going to make to either walk away from that person, say hi, or put your head down. These are just, it's the same thing here. When you're scrolling through your feed, or people are scrolling through their feed, they have these innate biases, and there's nothing you can do about it. Confirmation bias is one that everyone talks about, where you see something in your feed that says something you thought already existed, and you're like, oh, yeah, I'm right. That's just one of the many biases out there. So number 7 of 10. Machine learning stuff. So, and that's a big deal kind of here in UMass, because UMass, as you know, is ranked number 9 in the world for machine learning. So there's a lot of problems with machine learning and AI, and there's a lot of great things that come from AI and machine learning too. But here's one of the problems, is that it creates so much information that it doesn't allow people to process the relevant information. It's kind of like going back to the cognitive biases thing. Like, sometimes there's so much information, you just go to your shortcut bias. But with AI, it's creating so much information in feeds that you can't process it. There's just too much information out there. One thing I like to show, and maybe Aaron, you can put this up in the, I'd like to actually show this one though, if I could. This is a machine learning Twitter feed, or an AI Twitter feed. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. So for those of you who remember Sarah Palin, this is a feed that is solely just a bot of sorts, a scripted bot that posts things that combine statements from Eroyd's vault and speeches from Sarah Palin. So it took all like speeches they could find on the internet, all the text, and combined them with Eroyd's vault. For those of you who don't know what Eroyd's vault is, it is pretty much a place for people curious about drugs to go find experiences, like drug journals, like what people journaling about what they did when they took acid or shrooms and things like that. So it took text from that website and text from speeches of Sarah Palin and put them together in statements. So like, for example, read this statement right here. It says, "I wasn't nervous, but as the colors began to waver, I realized that everything was wrong. Crying, he isn't going to make America great again." And you can see how that's combining like a drug acid trip or something. The colors began to waver. And you can read this and go through it. But this type of stuff is invading the internet, and people think it's true. People don't realize that this is just like made up AI type of stuff, just bot stuff. And let me continue and can move on here. Another AI thing. So AI bots are also creating more enticing feeds, which aren't necessarily true, just kind of like I was talking about, but also things like Pizzagate. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Pizzagate, but this idea that the word pizza, this is kind of a recent thing, or at least within the year or so, well, a couple years or so, the word pizza is an undercover code name for the liberals for doing bad things. And it wasn't a big deal, but Facebook saw that it was very popular with a group of people, and it found likes and between those different types of people, and started pushing up that hashtag or that theme to those people. And it never existed, like they never heard of this term before. Their friends weren't sharing it, and it just got put into their feed. And Facebook created this phenomenon of Pizzagate. It really wasn't a big deal until the algorithm on Facebook pushed it up. And also to a precursor to QAnon. That's correct. Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's insane, right? That Facebook created this kind of conspiracy theory groups of people. And even if they're well-meaning people, that's really just insane that an algorithm did this. And then AI bots, they just have more power than people. We can't compete against super machines. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Moore's law, the idea that like processing speed is getting exponentially better and better and better all the time. And that law is kind of pushed out the window. It's even greater now. Like processing speed is getting crazy fast compared to just years ago. Like if you think about like the speed of a car in the 1950s and the speed of computer processing in the 1950s, they're very different. Like we haven't doubled the speed, we haven't tripled the speed of cars, quadrupled the speed of cars yet, but we have many, many thousands-fold increase the speed of computers. So who knows what's going to happen within 10, 20 years from now. Okay, so 8 of 10, and then we'll move along here of just tidbits. And I thought this was important because we're talking a little bit about election-related stuff. When the Electoral College was created, and if you don't know what the Electoral College is, I'm hoping you know, it's basically how we elect our president. When the Electoral College was created, there's many reasons for its existence, but one of the major reasons was to diminish the influence of outside actors or wrongful information becoming a part of the electorate, or people just not being informed to be able to vote correctly. Ultimately, as time went on, the debates went on in the Constitutional Convention, many other confounding factors. Interest came in to create what we know of as the Electoral College now. But one of the main reasons why it started, its genesis, was to prohibit disinformation and misinformation. That was really kind of the major genesis of the Electoral College. And I just want to say that because to me it's insane that now we're dealing with all this misinformation and stuff like that. And also too, I like showing this this video. I don't know if you can see it. Maybe it's not bright enough. But this is if you can see it on your screen, this is like a whole row of cell phones. Basically what people do is they put maybe a whole bank, a whole wall of cell phones, maybe 500,000 phones, and people are hired to just push buttons all day long. And you know, to get likes, to do certain things, and they get paid for this per hour. Let me see if I can make this a little bit better and less opaque for you guys. Can you guys see that? This is a whole row of cell phones, different types. And this happens all the time. There's fake accounts everywhere. So not only like do we have these algorithms that we have to fight, the economic incentives from social media, all these other things that we were just talking about, you also have to fight people who are proactively or intentionally creating false information for money. It's just crazy, right? And then the last thing, like what is really being done to fight all this information? Well, the platforms, you know, have to balance all these kind of factors that we talked about. Like they have to balance money, they have to balance, you know, appealing to their users, all these things. So while they're doing things, they're trying to appease a lot of other interests too. And so they're really not doing much at all. The US government is really kind of just investigating it at this point. They're holding hearings, but there hasn't been much proactively done to combat misinformation. And as I talked about earlier in one of the tidbits, it's really hard to combat a lot of this information because under our law, the First Amendment law specifically, we like to protect political speech. And there's a high bar to be able to write legislation prohibiting or limiting political speech. So it's near impossible actually for the government to really do anything. And in terms of private entities and people like us, it's like every man for themselves in a way. It's like very hard. So, but there is like steps there, you know, it's there's movies being made about this. The Social Dilemma is one of them. I've been recommending it to everybody. It's on Netflix, Social Dilemma, go see it. There's been people trying to combat this. There's also programs out there now educating people at different colleges. I have a couple of these programs that I can provide to people, but there's just really not enough happening compared to with the harm that is happening. But what can be done? So I'm biased, I'm a lawyer. I say we create laws and regulations, and I know we have enough already, but why is it that we have laws for telecommunications companies, like for our cell phones, for a lot of things that we already hold as private, but not Facebook, not Twitter? Like, why don't we have anything? Why are we letting them control what is put on? Why are we letting them self-regulate? It sounds really insane to me, because I think their interests are going to conflict with what is good for humankind. Also, too, I think we should ban the markets that are fueling these issues. Right now, the market, if you want to look at this esoterically, is our attention. Like the attention of us sitting there on these screens, keeping us on their engagement. So you kind of want to ban this idea and get rid of this market. Never before have we had a market in human futures. It's kind of really insane. So you kind of want to ban this. I think also too, you should be changing the economics of these platforms. There's many different ways to do it. I don't know the best way to do it. I've heard several ways to do it. One way might be to tax the amount of data they have on you. So it would incentivize them to have less data. And by doing so, their algorithms wouldn't work as well to be able to keep you engaged or put misinformation on. It'd be more of just a pure feed, or at least in theory it would, because maybe it wouldn't work as algorithms get better and better and better. You would need less data and less training. But you need to change the economics of these online platforms. Also too, I mean, from a personal level, people should be using fact-checking resources. And if they're not, maybe we should make them more available. Maybe we should make like some sort of widget or something embedded in Firefox or embedded in these platforms that can independently confirm whether the facts are true or not. And I always say to people that educate is like the biggest way to change things. I know this is a little bit of a different topic, but it's similarly, like if you look at cigarette smoking, the reason why here in America we were able to really combat and win the battle against cigarette smoking and the addiction was by educating. And this has been proven, this is not me just saying, we educated people about the harms of cigarette smoking. We didn't prohibit it. We just educated people about lung cancer, about what it can do to you. And right now, not very many people smoke anymore. If for those older generations here, you know that everywhere you walked, there was smoke in rooms. You would smell it. You'd see people smoking. You would even see doctors smoking. But right now, hardly anybody smokes. It's really weird to go out to a college party actually nowadays, and nobody is smoking cigarettes. And that's because we educated. We didn't write laws. We educated. So education, I think, is key too. There's some sources out there. There's things like this, like infographics that are helpful for people. I don't know necessarily what the best method is to get people to stop, believing fake news in terms of, a method, but there's stuff out there. So looks like I've been talking for quite a while, and I don't know if anyone fell asleep or not, but let's open this up for some discussion and some questions. Again, I just want to just harp across for those that weren't here at the beginning, that this is not a political discourse, and we take no position as to who should be elected or who shouldn't be elected. This is just a discussion about the misinformation online and disinformation online right now. So yeah, Aaron, do you want to take lead, or somebody want to ask some questions? Oh, Pamela, let's argue some Snoops. Yeah, that's right. So fact-checking sites like Snoops and PolitiFact are awesome sites to go to. So Pamela, I actually, it's funny you say that. So there's studies about when people receive information that is false and believe it true, and then they go to these sites, these fact-checking sites, and it says that they're false. It's in a lot of their psychology that it's showing proves to them that the facts are even more so true. It cements in their head these false narratives even more, being more true than they were otherwise. And I have several studies proving this, and it's kind of insane. So it's like, you just can't tell these people or that are believing false information that they're wrong because they believe it even more, which is insane to think about. Baffling, I know. Aaron, did you want to ask some questions, or anybody want to ask some questions or talk?
So I guess if anyone has any questions, you can raise your hand. From before the event, we had a few questions. Here's one. Is there any way to conveniently filter through information on the internet besides checking the source and having contextual knowledge?
Say it again a little bit. You broke up, but maybe I'll also put it in the chat.
Okay. Is there any way to conveniently filter through information on the internet besides checking the source and having contextual knowledge?
I mean, it's hard to filter through information, right? I think that's part of the issue, is that there's so much out there. And it's like, what is true? What's false? And I'll read this again. Is there any way to conveniently filter through information on the internet besides checking the source and having contextual knowledge? No, right? Like, I mean, that's part of the issue. So what people do a lot of times is they just believe it because they don't want to go and check it. And I'm a victim of that too. I'm sure when I read a lot of sources that I already have some trust in, that I just believe them and I don't go and check it. You know, for example, like CNN, I might believe some of the things that they say to me just because like I know that they're more of a truthful place. I do take everything CNN says with a grain of salt, though. Maybe NPR is a better source to say, but there's no way to conveniently filter. Kind of like Pamela said, you can go to these sources and check. You can do your own research, but are you gonna do that in every single link that pops up on your feed while you're scrolling? I don't think so. So there's really no convenient way.
We have a raised hand from someone. I'll turn on your mic, I think. Or Damon, do you want to speak?
Yeah. So
Hey, Damon.
this is, hey, how's it going?
Good.
One great speech, loved it. Second,
Thanks.
I feel like this has a cyclical issue, right? Because it almost feels like the best way to combat it is to kind of avoid the consumption of it. But the contrary to that is, at a certain point, you end up isolating yourself from the world. And
yeah.
the challenge thing is like, yeah, you can go to the reputable sources, but what happens when the reputable sources are feeding in through the same well that's already, a little bit like poisoned, right? And so there's people who are making bots that are basically just creating these fake media profiles like the Twitter one, right? But some of them are more legitimate and they'll start getting actual credibility, and then a company like Forbes will pick it up. And now Forbes is disseminating their information. And so now you can't even trust Forbes. And so it's funny because if you look at Japan, right, they have this issue with a hikikomori and otaku, where like these guys are just like living in their house surrounded by the world they've created for themselves. But in some ways, like they know the freaking secret.
Right. It's funny because, I've been getting so amped up about all this. It's probably why Aaron asked me to talk about this, that I deleted all my social media accounts, Damon, and about 4.5, 5 weeks ago. And that feeling of isolation that you talked about is so true. I feel like I really want to just get back on and just see what's going on with my buddies, my friends. But I keep reminding myself that, I'm being influenced here and, I'd rather not. But I'm finding myself more isolated. Actually, I didn't know Trump didn't have coronavirus until like mid-morning or later this morning. When my wife knew straight from Facebook, right when she woke up. So I have been isolating myself, and you're right. It's like, and then you find also two things spread on the internet from reputable sources that just have no truth, and it's just one person's opinion. And it's like, what do you believe anymore? So I've been finding myself reading a lot of things behind paywalls, and just because I'm just lacking material, and then also reading a lot of like RSS feeds that I have an aggregator. I use Feedly, feedly.com if you want to go check it out. And it's been helpful, but I'm missing that social element, Damon, that you're kind of talking about. And I think that's one of the best parts of this. And I think that's partly why it's so addictive. There are really great aspects of social media. And I think that's where it's like kind of tricky. Like it's like it does provide some sort of service, but at the same time, it has this seemingly benign effect on us, and it takes over our psyche, and it holds us captive in a way. But yeah, Damon, I'm feeling, I agree with you. It's cyclical in a way. But I can tell you though, I feel a lot happier right now with not being on my Instagram or Facebook within the last 4.5, 5 weeks. I'd recommend everyone try it. See the heart emoji. Any other thoughts or questions, or do you want to follow up, Damon?
Hey, Marvin, I got a quick question for you. It's
Sure, go
Sanjay.
ahead. Hey, Sanjay,
So
how are you?
I know you know a lot about Apple stuff, and you follow it pretty closely. And about a year ago, there's the new commercial now with Apple respecting your privacy. You don't want people to know all your personal stuff, and I think that stemmed out of a year ago. Siri, it was revealed from a whistleblower. Apple had hired about 300 contractors to listen to Siri, different people's Siris for quality control, quote, unquote. And it was a lot of personal information. And then once that scandal occurred, they fired those 300 people. But also privacy stuff with Apple and the FBI trying to get information from locked phones. They
San
think,
Bernardino.
yeah. And so I was wondering if you could, I mean, since you know a lot about the way Apple works, and you also know a lot about freedom of speech and some of these things, about how Apple is conducting itself within the framework of the law and some of their recent or they are.
So, part of so Apple is a genius company. Obviously, they're one of the most successful companies in the history of humanity, right? And one of the ways that they're so successful is making sure their users trust them. They have this goodwill that is undeniable. And recently, in the last 5 years or so, they've prided themselves on keeping all aspects private, like even keeping text messages between other iPhones encrypted. And then also, like, just as you mentioned, like with the FBI stuff, like there was that San Bernardino shooting, and FBI was trying to compel Apple to unlock their phone using a back door, and they said no, no, no. Eventually, actually, the FBI was able to crack the phone on their own, and it took them about a month actually to do it. But Apple has done a good job in terms of maintaining that privacy aspect, and rightly so. I mean, they want to keep their users, and it's just in their benefit to do so. But let's look at the other side of the coin. The way these devices are designed are to keep you on there. And again, we'll go back to these 3 goals of engagement, sorry, 3 goals of platforms, engagement, growth, and money. They're similar with Apple devices, just the same. Like when you're typing, and you have an iPhone, Sanjeev, because I know you, when you're typing and you see somebody else have like an instant message, and you see that ellipsis at the bottom, right? Like, what is that really there for? Why do you need an ellipsis to know that somebody's typing? Well, the reason is to keep you on your phone, right? Like that's built into the phone to keep you engaged, to keep this a useful part of your life. And Apple is kind of working together in a way, maybe not like in tandem per se, but they're working together to keep you invested in using these platforms, these devices. They're designing the phones to work with these platforms. Pamela writes, my brother in computer crimes at the Department of Justice wrote that briefly to try to compel, oh, he did, no way, to try to compel Apple to share that info, and it was unsuccessful, as Marvin noted. Yeah, that's super cool, Pamela. I would love to meet him. That is really awesome.
He's deputy chief of computer crimes in the Department of Justice.
Holy mackerel. That is super interesting. That was quite the battle, and that battle has like happened in series of several times. And it's like, and it brings up so many issues. It brings up the Fifth Amendment, the right of self-incrimination. It brings up the Fourth Amendment. It's a crazy, crazy case. I would love to talk to him. He must have so many stories. That is super cool. I'm a fanboy a little bit.
All of my friends were definitely on Apple's side, and he was like, "I wrote the brief, damn it."
Well, and he ultimately he lost, right?
Yeah.
The brief. Yeah. But this debate is actually still ranging, and I'm actually teaching U.S. v. Spencer, which is one of the criminal cases in the Fifth Amendment, on Tuesday. This idea of compelling encrypted devices to be open is still like, unfortunately, our case law doesn't support it. It's really an interesting field of law. Super cool. Yes, please connect me. Sandra, I hope that answers some of your questions. I could go on a long.
Yeah, no, that was
here.
great. It touched upon the Social Dilemma movie documentary that you mentioned on Netflix. I've yet to see it, but it goes.
Watch it.
Yeah, you know, how you're re-engaged. The dilemma is you want to be connected and you're searching for a connection. I think that the dilemma is, you know, it keeps re-engaging you. And you just mentioned the ellipses. You know, it keeps you on your phone. Maybe you shouldn't be on your phone, waiting for a text message. But the re-engagement and that is
so
part of the dilemma.
They're great with privacy, you know, but like what is also their goals too. Like they're and the privacy aspect is, you know, accomplishes that kind of that growth goal. Like it's going to keep people buying iPhones because they know it's going to be private. Because if they weren't, you know, people would stop buying them. At least I wouldn't have one. I know that for sure. Even if it had WhatsApp on there or whatever it might be. Any other questions?
So I have a question about legal precedent in regards to the ownership of your data, right? So, you know, we've had amendments to the Constitution, and I know that's a drastic step, right? One that, you know, we shouldn't probably even approach talking until other legal precedent has been set. But has there been, you know, substantial precedent for the ownership of your own data?
No. Well, I mean, so it's being developed right now. There's no substantial precedent if you want to use that terminology. There's cases coming out of district courts right now that I'm seeing talking about whether data is speech, whether you have rights in that data because you're creating it, but even though a third party is, I guess, recording it. And it's really just kind of beginning. This is kind of a new concept. But right now, as it stands, the third-party doctrine, Smith v. Maryland, is kind of a pivotal case, says that, you know, if your data is up on a third-party cloud or somewhere else, then you have no right to it. However, there's cases, one just came out in Maine during the summer, that talk about the fact that maybe your data is speech. Like, for example, like, if you if you are going to Trump rallies, like if you are always going to them and your phone is collecting that data by your GPS location, you could probably infer maybe that that person is a Republican or has that political view, or maybe that's a bad example, but data can pretty much say something about you, and it could be speech. So maybe there may not be this privacy implication yet, at least in our case law, but there are cases coming out suggesting that data is speech. And I think that's where that's a big area. I hope it develops more. That case in Maine that I was thinking of had to deal with net neutrality and ISPs being able to give data to data brokers. Damon, I'm guessing you know a little bit about data brokering. Is that what you're thinking about?
I mean, I get the concept of data brokering, but the concept of net neutrality in general, for me, is a little bit more fascinating where, you know, I don't know what your opinion is on it, but for me, like, you know, when we got rid of net neutrality, for me, that was like a big L. But maybe there's some tangible benefits that I'm not seeing.
Me neither. I mean, I guess, like, so in that case in Maine, the judge ruled on the district court level that the data that the ISPs were collecting is speech and therefore is protected by the First Amendment, and therefore there couldn't be laws written about that speech or about that data. Which was really interesting. So there's stuff coming out of it that otherwise wouldn't have if the FCC didn't change their opinion on it, and you know, from the Obama era.
So do you think that's locking it in more, where it's like we can't touch it now because of those not that we can't touch it, but you know, it's just making it more challenging.
I think it's going to have the opposite effect ultimately. I think what's going to be found is that the aggregate of data says something. If you look at US v. Carpenter, I don't know if you're familiar with US v. Carpenter, it's kind of a recent case that basically said that an aggregate of cell phone location data says something about a person, whereas before that was not the case. Like cell phone data was up with a third party, so therefore you had no privacy with it. So I think courts will now start finding that aggregates of information, like when you take information, put it together, it's different from when one piece of data is separate, and when they're put together, you should have more rights over it. And I think that's a growing consensus and a trend. And in Massachusetts, there is a case, maybe I think it was just about a year ago, that suggested that is true. That was in dicta in the case, so it actually wasn't decided per se, but it was about license plates actually, and in Cape Cod, where detectives were able to take license plate data of one license plate in an aggregate that was collected over Massachusetts, and that said something about that defendant, and that data, since it says something, should be protected. They ultimately decided that was not the case in that one case, because it was only two data points, but they inferred that data in its aggregate should have more protection. So I think maybe in the future we could see that that changes, and it's a trend.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because for me it's a concerning point, because the changing of laws is a slow and gradual process. So it can be frustrating, because you can see all the blatant abuses going on that we know, like the law is built on ethics, and so it's like, well,
yeah, and and there's a ton of abuses going on with that. I mean, just to kind of skirt and kind of go in a different direction with that, like I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with I forget the name, something Street, Babel Street is a company that does this. They scrape people's like Instagram accounts, like their pictures, and they put it into a database, and they're able to use facial recognition technology, and they sell that data to the Department of Homeland Security. They just got, if you look at the budget, you can see that they licensed it for only $10,000-$20,000 last year, and to many other departments, police departments, sheriff departments. And what they can do with it is they can take a picture of somebody and cross-reference it with this database that was pretty much just scraping social media platforms, and figure out what their name is, where they live. That's really insane to me.
This was about the protests, right?
Yes. You know exactly what I'm talking about then, right? Like there was a couple instances in Georgia. There was a couple in Philadelphia, Florida. Is that's what you're referring to, or you're thinking about too? Yeah. Kind of insane, right? Like, so they're able to identify people using these services that pretty much just scraped social media and then that also use facial recognition machine learning to identify people. I mean, to me, that's insane, because, as a society, we think that what we post on our Instagram is not going to be susceptible to all these cross references with machine learning and databases, and who knows how accurate these things are. And Damon, I imagine you're probably a computer science person if you're in this talk. You know that machine learning isn't always 100% accurate. It's just really kind of like a
it's like a toddler stuck in a cave, and it only knows what you show it.
That's right. And if you know about facial recognition technology, it really works well for white people, because back in the 1970s, Kodak was one of the developers of lenses and how it works with contrast with our faces. And actually, Professor Learn Miller told me a little bit about this. It's got racial bias. It's just bad. And this data that you're
Are you saying that our facial trackers are racist?
I mean, they have the result of being. If you type in,
Yes.
go ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a known thing. Like,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it's pretty bad. It is really accurate with white people or Caucasian people, but not very accurate with anybody with brown or black skin at all. And you can imagine, it's just crazy. And Professor Lauren Miller had, because I was in a talk with him, has suggested the reason for that really is because white people were creating this technology back in the 70s, like how cameras work and like the contrasts and things like that. Yeah, there's like some famous example, somebody probably in the audience knows about it, where like they misidentified some African-American person as a gorilla or something like that. I don't know what the exact example was, but it's just really bad. It has the ability to be really bad. Any other thoughts or questions? I can go all night if you guys want, but anyone have any other questions?
You mentioned you read a lot of news with paywalls, and I guess I'm wondering, do you think that paywalls could be a deterrent to the spread of like professional journalism and fact-based articles?
Deterrent in what sense?
I guess you mentioned on social media that misinformation will spread a lot faster. So somebody puts up a link of an article from Washington Post, and then you have that paywall that stops, and people aren't as likely to spread the next article.
Yeah, so it does, and that's part of the problem, is that people don't have access to information. And when I was speaking of paywalls, I was thinking more along the lines of like journals and like law review articles and stuff we actually have at UMass. All students at UMass, and Aaron, you know this, have access to close to 500 databases. That's really insane. And just one of those databases probably costs hundreds of dollars, if not a lot of money per month, if you were to get this by yourself. And we here at UMass all have access to it. That is very unlike the majority of people in this world. They just don't have access to well-written information, whether it be Washington Post, and I'm not saying Washington Post is well-written, but they just don't have access to information that is written that is behind a paywall. And a lot of times things behind paywalls are better just because the financial incentive is not so much based on ads. It's based on paying the authors to do good work. But yeah, I do think paywalls in a way stop people from getting good information. Aaron, just the name Aaron Schwartz, and we talked a little about this in our internet law and policy class. Pretty much committed suicide, and if you don't know Aaron Schwartz, look him up. Committed suicide because he was trying to, I guess, be an advocate for free information behind paywalls, or freeing information behind paywalls. He had downloaded the JSTOR database at the MIT library server, and ultimately got charged with copyright issues and CFAA issues, and eventually committed suicide because of the threat of going to jail. But Aaron Schwartz made this a point through his whole life, and a lot of people still agree with it, and I kind of agree with it too, that a lot of this information should be free. I understand that we want to promote the useful works and arts, that comes from our Constitution, by the way. That's the genesis of our copyright and intellectual property law. But at the same time, we want to provide information to people. A lot of these things behind paywalls, things I'm talking about, databases like engineering journals, physics journals, really like STEM, scientific, technology, engineering, mathematics stuff is in these journals, and no one has access to it unless you're at a university. And that just means that you have to be at a university or pay money to have access to information that can change the world. And that kind of sucks. You're limited.
So for me, that kind of feels like it's like I know I see a pattern in society constantly where, you know, the lower bottom class is always perpetually kind of going into quicksand and like being put into a slave class position. Whereas those with access to assets, resources, consistently have a leg up. And I know I feel like that's kind of where government intervention was designed to step in, just to kind of keep, honestly, the lower class from revolting and mauling everyone like chimpanzees. But
yeah, right. Information is power, right? Like, you know, and it's crazy. You're exactly right. And I think that's where Aaron Schwartz was like, this is ridiculous. Like, that, you know, it's keeping people from knowing what's going on. And that's partly why I'm so upset and that with the information that's out on the internet. It's like, it is making it worse. Not only did a lot of people not have access to just good information, now they're swamped with misinformation and disinformation and a lot of propaganda at the same time. So how are they even to get out of that proverbial quicksand that you talk about, right? Like, it's horrible. And there's really no way to fix it right now in terms of like fixing paywalls, because the way it's set up, it's really insane. I think it's Darwin's evolution of species that's behind a paywall, and you can't get it unless you pay money for it or buy the book. I think it's behind. I think that's the famous example. And if that's true, let's just say it is. That's insane. That means that like one of the most important scientific works of humankind cannot be accessed because of some person who wants to own the rights to be able to publish it, or reproduce it, or whatever it might be. Insane. Should I do a mic drop right there too? Any other questions before we bounce for dinner, I guess?
I guess I have one last, if you have time.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
I guess like big social media groups like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, they do a lot of work with banning specific misinformation. Recently, there was like the big thing against QAnon, in the past, Pizzagate. Are you worried that, I guess, by having these big social media groups banning and removing these posts, that they're pushing users to, I guess, more individualized, smaller social media groups that aren't as regulatory and creating bigger rifts and more bubbles?
Yeah. I don't know if you're asking me this question because we talked about this a little bit, but yes, I am. A couple of weeks ago, I spent it was a Sunday, almost an entire Sunday, just on the deep dark web and I think it's 8kun, reading QAnon stuff. And it's a whole community. And the only way you can get there is through Tor. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Tor. But the only way you can get there is, you know, through Tor and finding that onion URL, which, you know, requires you having some sort of special access, finding it in what they call a paste bin or something else like that. And yeah, you're right, Aaron, it does. It creates like these own little like groups of people. And it pushes is pushing them to these little like conglomerates, and almost in a way creating their own echo chamber and isolating them, kind of like Damon talked about, so they can't hear anything else. I'm sure that, you know, they don't just stay there on their Tor browser, and that they also go on other sites during the day. But like, yes, I do think it pushes people into their own little worlds. Yeah, at least there's less opportunity to spread on a smaller platform. That's true. So now you're containing the virus. You're quarantining the information, right? In a way.
Will there be a way for us to get access to the recording of this? Because I don't know, I feel like this conversation is one that most of us want to have with like an uncle. You know which uncle we're talking about.
Yeah, so funny. Yeah. I think that Aaron can answer that. Aaron, are you going to be posting this, or what's the thoughts on that?
We'll be emailing it and sharing it on the Discord after, especially for people who weren't able to make it.
Thank you.
Cool. I hope you can chop out all my mess ups and stutters and things like that.
If there are no more questions, I guess that's it for the
I
day.
don't want everyone to kill me, but I just gotta ask. In
Yeah, go ahead.
Massachusetts, at least, how is the dialogue in regards to this? Right? How is the legal community handling it? Do they feel like it's overwhelming? Do they have enough education on their end? Is it something that like people are starting to mobilize around it and like really take seriously?
So there's very few in the legal community that are thinking about this and that know about this. And I just know that because I talk to other lawyers and I've talked about this situation, and I feel like I'm educating people all the time, especially my older peers. They have no idea what's going on. There are a few. ACLU is one of them, and while I love a lot of what ACLU does, there's some things I don't like what they do, but I can say that for the most part, they're pretty cool. Here in Massachusetts, I think they have a website called privacysos.org. I'd have to check that out to see if that's still up, but that's based out of Boston, privacysos.org. Yeah. Privacysos.org is awesome. It's a blog pretty much, and it's also kind of like the center for ACLU's I guess issues on this, and ACLU has been really great at tackling these things. So the ACLU was part of the Riley v. California case, several other big cases like that that have made a big difference. And in fact, that license plate case I mentioned earlier, the ACLU was on that. But beyond that, so Berkman Center and Harvard, beyond those two people, those two groups, that's about it. There's not too many lawyers. There's no really memberships and organizations. This is kind of a new thing, Damon. I feel like I'm one of the few and fortunate to understand it as a lawyer. But there's not much headway in the legal world right now. It's just kind of like the laws, right? Everything is always lagging, and people have things to do, so it's just kind of, I don't know. It's very lonely.
And on that somber note, we can all go to dinner.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a pleasure being here, and yeah, I hope you guys have a great weekend.
Thank you again.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is really great.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. That was a great talk.
Thank you.